Okay, I want to welcome everyone to our regular meeting of council for Monday, April 8th. And we want to start by just acknowledging that we are holding our meeting on the unceded territories of the Hoopachasit and Sashot First Nations. Councillors, are there any late items? None. And clerk, are there any late items?
Madam Mayor, there's one late item under staff reports F3, Hive Cannabis application, and it's Jack McClemens' public input response.
Okay. Great. Would somebody like to move the agenda?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Okay, and we have meeting minutes from the special in-camera meeting held at 4 p.m. on March 20th, 2019, and the special in-camera meeting held at 12:15, and the regular meeting of council held at 2 p.m. on March 25th. Would somebody like to move adoption?
Move to adopt.
Seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any additions or corrections? All in favor? Carried. And that takes us to public input period, an opportunity for members of the public to address council on topics of relevance to city business. A maximum of 4 speakers for up to 3 minutes each. Would anybody like to speak? Come on forward. And if you don't mind just stating your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. My name is Sean Bruce. I'm with Hive Cannabis, so I live in Vancouver. So I just want to take a minute to briefly to talk about our company, give some information on our location, and also talk about some of the letters we received. So Hive is it's a BC retail cannabis company looking to set up 8 locations. We already have municipal support for 3 of those locations with 2 under construction. Our founder, Dr. Neil Rockerby, he's a physician that specializes in addiction medicine. So he currently works for a Clarity Medical Clinic in the field of cannabis, studying it, researching it. And his jump into the non-medical was more about expanding the good that cannabis can do, but also because he feels as a physician, he can have positive impacts on the community and conduct the store safely. So with respect to our location, we feel that it's a good use in a commercial district. Our parking and traffic, we don't feel there's going to be any major impacts. We see it's a good fit for the other businesses in the area. In addition, there's other liquor stores in the area that we just wanted to point out. Part of our process, we conduct our own community consultations. So we did that this time and we're able to get 6 letters to support. We conduct our own community consultation for 2 main reasons. One, we want to meet our neighbors. We want to get input. We want to have conversations with them. But 2, we find that people that are in support of cannabis don't necessarily come out the same as people that are against cannabis. So we like to talk to them and see if they'll submit a letter of support. So we did that, and a lot of the reasons we find that people support cannabis, one, the 2 reasons that support are the federal bill keeping cannabis out of the hands of children, but also to eliminate the black market, but also for business owners that they can see that we will drive business to their location, and they're looking forward to that. For the letters against, I've consulted quite a bit in Western Canada. I see I'm running out of time, so I'll try to do this quickly. I've done a lot of stores in Western Canada. I've seen a lot of themes. And a lot of these themes are either based in fear or anecdotes. And the fear-based concerns aren't necessarily backed by statistics. And we've looked at the statistics. Legal cannabis will reduce crime, and legal cannabis will help keep it out of the hands of children. Maybe a small thing like our child-proof containers, or a big thing by eliminating the black market where dealers will sell to children. So those are the major themes that we see. People are scared because they don't know the impact that it's going to have, or they have anecdotes on the impact that they think it might have. And some of that impact did come from the black market stores or the gray market stores that don't get the level of vetting that we're getting from the province. So we're excited to locate in Port Alberni, and we're definitely looking for your support today. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, would any other members of the public like to speak? Okay. Oh, sorry, come on forward, Keith.
Hello, Keith Ambrose, 3147 Second. I noticed on page 6, I'm just going to speak in advance of what you're going to talk about it later in the meeting, but there's a letter from the District of Kitimat, asking the city to endorse a graduated licensing program for motorcycles. Now, I've been a motorcyclist most of my adult life anyhow. And there's definitely a gap in licensing, and you can go out today and you can buy a motorcycle that is literally a rocket ship. So a 16-year-old with money can buy a machine that there's no possible way they would have the skill, not the time, not the years, not the knowledge, not at all. And a car can be done the same thing, but it's a little bit restricted in a car, but it's not so restricted on motorcycles. So graduated licensing makes absolute sense for safety. Parents can't control their kids once that rocket's under them. They're gone from home, like I was. I survived all of my motorcycling hours. I can tell you, though, I've seen a lot of carnage. And a lot of times it was simply too much machine for the person that was riding it. And it's just that something in today's society, the machines are fantastic. They're fantastic, but we haven't kept up. And so any help that in the safety, like a car, you get a graduated license, it's quite restricted. And on a motorcycle, nothing, right? You get your license, and like the old days, like we all got our licenses in the old days, you're out the door and your parents might not see you for a while, right? But with the graduated license for cars, there's some control, but not the bikes. So anything we can do would help the youth. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. Would anybody else like to speak at public input? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our delegations. And the first one is, oh, did somebody put their hand up? Oh, come forward.
Hi, my name is Callum. I'm from 3541 10th Avenue, and I just wanted to thank council for revisiting my issue about the development variance request and giving me the opportunity to have some input before any conditions or motions are accepted. Thank you very much.
Okay. So moving on, we have our first delegation from the Alberni Valley Community Stakeholders Initiative to End Homelessness Committee, Patty Edwards and Terry Deacon. So just a reminder for delegations, we have 10 minutes.
We'll talk fast.
Thank you.
So for the new members, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name's Patty Edwards. I'm constituency assistant for Scott Fraser, MLA. And just for a little background on our committee, the Alberni Valley Community Stakeholders Initiative was formed in 2007. So we've been working on housing affordability issues in the valley for over 12 years. At that time in 2007, the city council asked the MLA to come for a meeting because they were concerned about their ability to figure out which community groups that wanted to come for land or money or development costs or whatever, who had the best priority in their needs. So the stakeholders group was formed, and the city council asked the MLA if I could chair that committee because of my long-term advocacy for landlord-tenant issues. So that was approved, and so I've been the chair for the most of that time. And so in 2008, we had a small grant from Island Health, and we made like a 10-page plan to work on housing affordability. And in 2015, we realized that's an old plan now, it's 7 years old. So we went to the Alberni Valley Community Foundation, and we got a grant to hire a consultant to make a 10-year plan. And we have that 66-page community plan, and that's available on the Health Network website at the ACRD, so if anybody wants to see it there. So one of the issues around that plan was to hire a coordinator for the committee because we're volunteers and a group of various stakeholders, but we needed a coordinator to pull together to get the plan implemented. So we were given a grant by the regional district in 2016 they said they would give us $20,000 if we could come up with matching funds. And so the city, we got $10,000 from the city, we got a grant from the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board, and a grant from the Community Foundation. And so we had that grant, and we hired Terry Deacon, who's here today. She was the coordinator for the last year and a half, and she has a master's degree in community development, so we were very lucky to be able to hire somebody locally that had the skills. And Terry's here today to give you a report on what we've accomplished in the year and a half that she's been with us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Patty. So yes, I am Terry Deacon, and I have been the coordinator for the AVCSI since September 2016, and up on the slide there it says November 2019, but it's November 2018. I jumped ahead of myself. Yeah, so I'll just, this is my clicker. Nope. Which, middle one?
Everybody gets confused with it. We probably need a new clicker.
Perfect. So first I want to thank City Council for funding part of the coordinator position, and thank all our other funders. I want to thank Council for having an active participant on our committee, because it's really important to have that there. So Dennis Sauvé was our councillor who attended, and he was absolutely fabulous for the committee. Really enjoyed him there, and we look forward to having Councillor Poon attend our committee meetings from moving forward. I also want to acknowledge all the stakeholder agencies that have provided input, the community members who were interested, and the people with lived experience who came to the committee and shared input. So the role of the coordinator, I was hired to coordinate and implement the recommendations from the strategic plan that Patty talked about, to engage local community and funding partners to actively work together and prevent and address homelessness, to expand AVCSI, to prepare fundraising and write grants, and to deliver formal presentations to all levels of government, funders, associations, media on behalf of AVCSI. So the strategic plan priorities were to protect and increase housing stock, join with all sectors in the community financial well-being, so work in partnership with the poverty reduction committees that were going on in the community, transition to systems planning model for housing and homelessness, enhance information collection and dissemination, which we did a lot of, improve capacity for housing system coordination and implementation. I'm just going to go through quickly some of the highlights of what we did over the past year and a half while I was coordinator. So we did 2 point-in-time homeless counts. So one was put together by myself and the committee and was done in 2016. And at that time we had 73 surveys completed, 55 people with no permanent housing. And the Indigenous population was totally overrepresented in those who were homeless, so meaning that we need to get that support out there for our Indigenous population. 38% of those people were sheltered and 36 were unsheltered at that time. And then a second homeless count was conducted in 2018. It was coordinated by BC Housing and local coordinators Marcy DeWitt and Maggie Hodge-Kwan, and supported by AVCSI. At that time, 147 people were experiencing homelessness. At least that's who completed surveys. So that's 3 times what were there in the year and a half before that. 43% were sheltered, and that means that they have a place to stay, but it's only a transitional place. And 57% were unsheltered, meaning that they were living in derelict buildings, cars, camping, whatever. And 48% identified as an Indigenous at that time. And we saw a change in the demographics of homelessness. So 15% were youth, 10% were seniors, and that population is growing. It's not getting smaller right now. It's still growing. And 32% of those who identified as homeless had been in the foster care system or the youth care system under a youth agreement. So the committee spent a lot of time doing education. So we had a housing forum back in 2017 where we gathered information about different housing projects that were working in different communities to see what we could use that would work in our community. So instead of reinventing the wheel, using things that are already working in other communities. We did a lot of collecting information, doing research, putting together brochures, educating the community. We brought in a film called Us and Them and provided it to the community. We purchased a copy and gave it to ADSS and was presented at ADSS to a couple of the classes, and then got the youth thinking about, okay, how can we work on homelessness, which was a really good exercise. We developed a Facebook page and a Google group to get information out to the community. We worked on several reports, which are all available through me if anybody is ever interested in them. And we did news articles and a Shaw Cable interview. Some of the other highlights include introducing the system of care and systems planning, which didn't really go over very well with the committee. Had a lot of challenges, talk about systems planning, and I don't know if it's people don't understand it or are not sure what it's about, but it was really difficult to get that going. I attended the Homelessness Services Association of BC inaugural conference over in Vancouver and brought a bunch of information back to the committee and to the community. We participated in the Housing Town Hall, that was facilitated by MP Gord Johns. Did a CBC radio interview, supported development and circulation of the living wage document, which I still think needs to get out there more public and needs to be circulated because I think it's a really important document. Applied for funding through Homelessness Partner Strategy. I did that twice, both years that I was in there, and we weren't successful at getting that. It's really difficult to get funding for paid staff positions. People are willing to fund projects, but not willing to fund the people who are going to put those projects together. We engaged several different and additional stakeholders to the committee. It grew the committee, promoted Housing First principles that I'm still working on. We still don't have a true Housing First project happening in Port Alberni, and I think that we need to have one. And researched existing and new strategies locally, provincially, and nationally. Some of the challenges that we had were collaboration amongst service providers, and I hear this a lot out there in the community. It's very difficult, and I know that when service providers have different mandates, different directives, different funding agencies, all want to compete for the same pot of funding, it makes it really difficult for people to want to get along, because how are they going to be able to maintain their agencies and keep their agencies going if they don't have the funding to do so? So that's part of what hinders that process. And I talked about the limited interest in systems planning, and systems planning is becoming it's all across the nation. There is a systems planning collective that is being worked on to address homelessness throughout the whole nation. And I think it's a really great way to go if we can get the buy-in from the community to go that way. Limited input and direction from our administrative body and our stakeholders, so it made sometimes the coordinator position difficult because I didn't know which direction to go in. Lack of funding available for coordinator wages, and we do have an increase in our homelessness and changing demographics. Some of the community successes that we've seen, so the new shelter is great. I'm really happy to have it. It's a fabulous building. And they have supports in place for people, but it still hasn't answered all our homelessness problems. There are people still living on the streets, there are still people camping, there are still people with nowhere to go. The expansion for Rainbow Gardens is great. The apartments on Athol Street are coming along. The Low Energy Housing Society has done some great work and have another project coming. The ACAUSE second stage housing with the AVCSI is really supportive of that and wants to see that go forward. and increased bylaw enforcement. And we've noticed that makes a difference. It makes a difference both ways, you know, for and against the homelessness, but it is helping. So that brings me to our recommendations. And so my very first recommendation is greater input and support from the administrative body. And because that's the Social Planning Council, the AVCSI committee is just a committee. We don't have any status. So the Social Planning Council took us under their wing, and they had the, took care of the funding for the committee and for the coordinator position. The other things that we've been throwing around is a referendum or alternative approval process to form a regional housing coalition. It's been done in Comox and it's been done in Cowichan, and it seems to be working really well for them. We would like the City of Port Alberni, if the referendum or alternative process approval process doesn't work, we would like City Council to consider the Social Planning Commission and have housing as a major priority of that commission, because it is such an important issue. Address zoning and bylaws to encourage and support secondary suites, lane housing, all those kinds of things that are very difficult for people to do. And I know that's being worked on, and I really appreciate that. But it was in my report that I wrote last November. So
Very important point.
it is. And develop an integrated local and regional system of care. So I keep going back to that systems planning, because I think it's really important for all of our agencies to be able to work together and to have continuity, to have accessibility, and have collaboration, because without that, we're never going to address all the social issues that we have. And develop some strong homelessness prevention strategies, which I don't see a lot of in place, and that's somewhere where we need to start. It's okay to address it from this side, but we also need to go from the bottom side and prevent it from happening.
Okay.
So questions?
Thank you very much for your report. It's really important for us to see an update on what's happened over time and get a better understanding of what's going on. So thanks so much for coming. Council, any questions? Councillor Solda.
Not quite a question, but Terry, you forgot to leave something out on your little bio there. Terry was the Shelter Society chair for many years, working on homelessness before that. And I'd like to get a copy of that, or council get a copy of your presentation if we can. And also regarding the CSI, I was on council when it was first implemented and on the homelessness for many years too, and it's really great that it's still continuing. And just so council knows, it was started because of the agencies all wanting the same dollars, and they came to council, and the mayor at the time, which was Mayor McCrae, formed this group, and I think it was a great, and you guys have done some marvelous work, and I'm glad it's going forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Corbeil.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. You mentioned one of the challenges was the collaboration amongst all the service providers, and I was the vice president of the Alberni Senior Citizens Housing Society, and we were just a bunch of volunteers. And I guess I'm asking you, how could we kind of bring all these people together and sort of utilize all the expertise that is out there? Is that social planning commission's role, do you think?
That's what I'm hoping, because we've tried it through AVCSI and through other stakeholders initiatives. I know that AVCSI is not the first social, and we do have a social planning council, and it still doesn't seem to be working. So I think it's going to take somebody who's really strong, who really has a good understanding of systems planning and how we can implement that and get that working together.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Terry, in your presentation, you pointed out that when you did the homelessness count most recently, there's a demographic of seniors that are now homeless, and that demographics is growing. Is there any reasons that you can attribute that particular demographics is growing in this homelessness issue?
I don't know. That's a really great question, and I don't know the
Okay.
answer to that. I do know that housing affordability is a part of that, so people are having to move out of their homes. You know, if a partner goes into a care facility or anything in your life happens, we're all one step away from homelessness, because if anything tragic happens in our lives and we can't afford to keep the homes we have, where do we go?
Okay.
There's so limited housing and affordability. That's
Yeah.
a big part of it.
Because I find that section really disturbing.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, thank you for your presentation. I've heard out there that there's people who prefer to be homeless. Are they part of your statistics, or do you encounter people that don't want to be helped, or?
That's okay. And that too is a really great question. And I know the perception is out there that there's people that choose to live out in the bush, and they choose to live out there because they can't live anywhere else with the rules that they want imposed on them, right? So a Housing First project, which I've been advocating for a few years now, it would be somewhere that people can go, and it doesn't matter if they're using alcohol, drugs, you know, don't know how to shower, don't have life skills. It doesn't matter about that piece of it. What matters is that we give them a home, we give them a roof over their head, and then we start putting in the supports that will support them to address whatever issues they have. But people can't work on those things if they are out in the bush. And they may say, I want to be out here, but they want to be out there because they don't have any rules to follow out there. I think they really do want a home.
Thank you. Councillor Poon, any questions? Okay. Further to Councillor Haggard's comments, I think a part of our issue is the type of housing stock that we have as well. And last year, the provincial government started talking about housing needs assessments for communities that would look at the type of housing stock that they have, look at what they're missing. And I think that that's something that is, and there was funding available from the provincial government as well, but I don't know if there's details on that put out yet. I think that's something that as a community we need to be looking at, because we all know we have a huge stock of single family homes, not a lot of townhomes, not a lot of condos, not a lot of apartments. Obviously we're short in actual seniors care facilities as well. But I think our you know, something that we really need to start looking at is actually getting some data on where our housing needs are, so that we can use that to promote specific types of development, so that we can use it to promote specific types of social housing, and work forward in a way that is based on the data that's out there. So
Right.
I think that's important. And then my last question is on Housing First, which is something I care a lot about as well, and I think it's a great opportunity. I think we often wonder as a city, you know, what is our role? Because it's not necessarily to lead social initiatives. Those are more provincial responsibilities. What's the best way the city can be involved, in your opinion?
I think by working with one of the nonprofit associations that are already in place to develop a Housing First project. And I know that the Shelter and CMHA, they have great housing projects, but none of them are real Housing First projects. And I think, you know, having somebody, and if I could be a paid coordinator still, I would continue to be a coordinator for the AVSCSI and work with John Howard Society. They have some great projects and some great models to work with. And I think that the city needs to get involved and say, yes, we're supportive of this initiative. Who's going to take it on?
For sure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions from council? Okay, thanks very much for your presentation and for the work that you're doing. Okay, and our second delegation is Tessa Hall, here to provide information on BC Step Code and how it can be implemented.
So right in the middle. Yep. Okay, I won't touch anything but.
Welcome, Tessa.
Thank you. This is very loud. The built environment, where people live, work, and play, contributes to over 17% of all greenhouse gas emissions here in BC. The current provincial and federal government has made highly focused efforts to take steps to reduce these emissions in hopes of meeting our climate action goals. The Clean BC report, which I think you would have heard a little bit more about in your last summit, takes direct aims at the built environment with targeted measures that can and are being influenced on a municipal level with great success. Over the years, a variety of building programs in BC have supported the construction of energy efficient homes and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. One of the most comprehensive and coherent out there is the BC Energy Step Code. My name is Tessa Hall. I live just up the street at 3991 Argyle. I've worked in the construction industry here in BC since 2006, primarily in doors and windows. I have a bachelor's degree in business administration, and I'm in the process of certifying as an energy advisor here in BC. Today I'm going to talk to you about the BC Step Code, how it works, why it's important, how it can make a positive impact on our residents and builders, and who's already using it that we could learn from. But maybe I should back up and explain why it's called the Step Code and what that means. The BC Energy Step Code is a performance-based path that provides a transformative shift from our current prescriptive methods. This path gradually takes our buildings from our current code minimum requirements through a number of enhanced performance targets, or steps, with the goal of getting our houses, bless you, to net zero energy ready by 2032. That's only 13 years from now. For clarification, a net zero energy ready building is constructed to such high energy efficiency standards that it could, with additional measures, generate enough on-site energy to meet its own needs. In a prescriptive code, middle. I swear I'm hitting the middle. There we go. In a prescriptive code, the builder is required to build wall assemblies to a certain minimum effective R value, use mechanical systems as prescribed, and meet minimum performance values on windows and door products, among many other things. However, these prescriptive requirements are never actually aggregated to give any information on how that specific building performs, given the items and the techniques that were used. In contrast, the BC Energy Step Code requires that an energy model is done prior to the permit being issued to evaluate the efficiency of the proposed home. This is congruent with the way builders are being taught now to think of a home as a system rather than a compilation of individual products and practices. The energy model takes into account the geographical location of the home, where it's placed on the lot, what types of air and other barriers are intended to be used by the builder, the mechanical systems that are specified, and how the building envelope is going to achieve its performance targets. All of this information is evaluated to give the municipality a reasonable picture of how the home is expected to perform once it's built. This information is then compared with the desired step in the code to ensure compliance. Once the permit is issued and construction begins, the builder may run into challenges due to lack of availability on a certain product, an expressed desire from the homeowner, problems with practical applications of the original design. The list goes on. Inevitably, substitutions to the original plan will happen, but there's a fail-safe here for all parties. The energy advisor can run scenarios based on the proposed changes and provide guidance to ensure that compliance is still met. As a professional in the construction industry, I am acutely aware of the amount of waste our industry produces, and I'm constantly on the lookout for products and practices that can help me reduce the environmental footprint that I leave. I think of the Step Code as a tool to guide our building professionals and homeowners to help make better, more informed choices while they're building dream homes. It does this on a number of different levels. First and foremost, it provides healthier, better quality, longer lasting buildings Constructing to higher energy efficiency standards has tangible benefits for homeowners and tenants alike. High-performance buildings are healthier due to better indoor air quality and reduced mold and moisture. These buildings are more comfortable to live in due to better temperature controls. And energy-efficient buildings tend to be higher quality and last longer because of greater attention to detail. Second, it's been my experience that it's common to get pushback from industry when any change is suggested, but not so in this case. The building industry in BC helped to develop the STEP code and are some of its biggest proponents. Most of the products that are needed to build to the required levels of performance are already on the ground and being used today. Industry collaborators on the STEP code included the Canadian Home Builders Association, the Urban Development Institute, and the BC Construction Association. Industry likes the STEP code because it provides consistency and predictability in beyond code requirements and sends a clear message on where the province is heading in energy efficiency. Industry just likes to be prepared for changes, and the STEP code does exactly that. Third, the STEP code is fundamentally a consumer protection tool. There's no industry that isn't expected to evolve and improve to better serve its customers, and the construction industry should be no different. In the long run, inefficient, energy-wasting homes don't serve consumers. The STEP code protects them by ensuring that the performance of every home is modeled, tested, and then verified by third parties, providing consumer confidence. Next, the steps involved with meeting the lower levels of the code are modest. Step 3 can usually be achieved for less than a 2% construction premium in comparison to a code minimum house now, while providing up to 76% in reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Now, there is evidence to back this up from a comprehensive BC housing study that I've left a link to in the final slide for you guys. And you'll notice as you go through it that step 3 seems to be the sweet spot. In most cases, the incremental costs are not much different than step 2, but step 3 is where we start to see significant energy and emission benefits. According to the study, step 3 is the best return on policy investment when adopting and implementing the STEP code. Finally, this complements our council's vision and mission objectives through supporting sustainable and environmentally responsible infrastructure. Council recently received a report from Joseph Kalenda entitled The Next 1400 Days that provided guidance for the development of a new OCP and included recommendations for the environmentally responsible development in our community. The BC Energy STEP Code fills this void. As you can imagine, this promotes a much more collaborative process for the construction industry, and I'm sure it will take some time for all the parties to work out the kinks, which is why I'm asking you to consider implementing the STEP code now as an enhanced performance path. In my current respective roles, I have the opportunity to hear from industry leaders in many construction fields, and we are all preparing for the mandatory implementation of Step 3 on or around the December 2020 deadline, as it aligns best with the 4-year cycle of the Energy Efficiency Act. But regardless of whether that happens or not, we know that the province plans for all new construction to meet the requirements of Step 5, or Net Zero Energy Ready, by 2032. Rather than punt the issue down the road, it makes sense, and it will be cheaper if industry can build on experience in constructing to the lower steps. Having a few years of experience building to, say, Step 2 or Step 3 makes it far easier to achieve the higher steps. Now, we have some incredible builders and tradespeople here in this region, and incentivizing those higher steps for them now will allow our local champions to demonstrate what's possible at very little cost to anyone involved. But these building practices are not really new. In fact, more than half of the Capital Region professionals already use some of the key tools that are used in the STEP code, whether it's performance-based pathways, air tightness tests, energy modeling. The map above shows the municipalities that are either consulting with the government on adopting part or all of the STEP code, or already have done so. Key island regions include Campbell River, Comox, Nanaimo, Duncan, Saanich, and the City of Victoria. But for the municipalities that have participated so far, application of the STEP code is not a blanket approach. Surrey, the newest municipality to adopt, implemented Step 1 for all Part 9 buildings and Step 3 for the majority of Part 3 buildings, with plans to achieve Step 5 or net zero energy ready by 2025. Victoria, on the other hand, ran with a softer start, requiring Step 1 for the first year, while providing grants and incentives for the utilization of energy advisors during the process. Although they will move to the higher steps in January of next year, they took a hard look at the code's targets and the types of homes that were being built and made concessions for smaller buildings and laneway housing so that they would provide for more density and not cause any further stress to the housing crisis. Finally, Campbell River, who hasn't fully mandated the STEP code at this time, but they simply offer incentives ranging from a few $100s to the entire cost of the permit to builders and homeowners who can prove that they've met the steps by working with an energy advisor. In a low carbon, clean growth economy, buildings and communities will be highly energy efficient. They will rely on clean electricity and renewable energy. They will be smart and sustainable. Making the built environment more energy efficient reduces greenhouse gas emissions, helps make homes and buildings more comfortable and more affordable, and it can promote innovation and clean job opportunities. Communities across the province have taken an interest in promoting this, and I think that it's time that we join their ranks. We can look to them for guidance as we develop a plan that fits the needs of our community and our builders, but we can also look inwards. We have builders here who are either practicing now or have expressed interest in taking the leap. We have local building supply stores that would be happy to provide product demonstrations and energy advisors that would be more than happy to provide consultation to aid in the transition so that we can actively create an environmentally responsible and sustainable future for the residents of Port Alberni now and for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that.
You're
Council, questions? Councillor Corbeil.
Yeah, I have two questions, and thank you very much for that presentation. Just recently at the Council of Forest Industry Convention, we heard the term mass timber over and over and over again, and you know, the BC government has just made some announcements. One, they raising the height of wooden buildings to 12 stories. They're going to do the rebuild of the BC Museum with mass timbers. A large portion of St. Paul's Hospital is going to be used with mass timbers. Does that fall under the definition of the BC STEP code?
It may fall under Part 3. Buildings are separated into Part 9 and Part 3 buildings. Part 9 are primarily single-family homes and homes with suites, secondary suites, that sort of thing. Part 3 gets into anything over 600 square meters and typically includes institutions. So yes, it may fall under Part 3 of the building code.
And I believe I heard that in order to meet the BC STEP code, construction may have to be larger, for example, 2x10 construction, which might make it difficult to build in the field, and we may need to look at building in a center, i.e. a prefabricated housing that is brought out and put together out the field. Does that make sense?
That does. It's a very common misconception. What they're doing when they're saying that they want you to use a 2x10 wall is telling you want to hit a certain effective R value in that wall. But actually using a 2x10 makes the energy efficiency of the wall lower because you have so much transference of the wood between the inside and the outside of the house, that it reduces the insulation value in that wall. It's actually much more effective to do a split insulation where you have a 2x4 or 2x6 wall on the inside with a 16-ounce center stud and a minimum, say, 1-inch insulation on the outside of the wall than it would be to do an effective R value on a 2x10 wall. So there are many different ways, I guess, to answer that question, but there are many different ways to construct a wall that would meet the same effective requirements. And one of the beauties of this is that the builder gets to choose which one is most effective for this home in this location with our supplies that are readily available.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
I'm just kind of curious to know if we implement any of this in our, forgot the mic, in our building at all in the city of Port Alberni. Do we do anything?
Do we implement anything to do with the step code at the moment?
Yes.
No, we do not.
So there's nothing in there. Okay.
Not at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, so thanks very much for this presentation. I find the step code very interesting, and at the recent, I was at last week, the Mayor's Caucus in Prince George. We had an extensive presentation on the Clean BC, and we talked a lot about step code. And there were a lot of communities there who were taking early steps to implement step code. So it was interesting to hear a pretty thorough conversation around why certain communities were taking which steps, at which times. And I think it seemed that at least most of the communities represented there were working through some form of early incentive or early implementation incentives, that kind of thing. So very interesting, and definitely I think something for us to be talking about. I think a great first step for us would be to ask staff for a report on what we could potentially be looking at. I will make a motion if we get a staff report on options and possible recommendations.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay. Are there any questions on the motion? Okay. Well, all in favor? Carried. So we've left that pretty open, but I think that that's because we are not builders. So
may I just mention one more thing?
Sure.
In the very last slide that I have there are multiple reports from different municipalities on how they've implemented and why they've implemented what they have. So just a quick little short session to try and find some of that information for you guys.
That's great. Well, thanks very much for coming today and
you.
for putting this all together.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. On to item E, unfinished business. And the first one we have is the Permissive Tax Exemption Committee. So council needs to appoint members to the Permissive Tax Exemption Committee that we spoke about at our last meeting. Councillor Solda.
So, Madam Mayor, I'm going to make this motion, and I would like, the motion is that Council of the City of Port Alberni appoints Mayor Minions, Councillor Poon, Councillor Haggart as members of the Permissive Tax Exemption Committee to review policy and make recommendations to Council.
Is there a seconder?
And they can thank me later.
And are Councillor Poon and Councillor Haggard both okay with that?
Thank you. I was going to volunteer anyway, so thank you.
Wonderful to hear. Okay, excellent. And thank you, Councillor Solda, for that. Are there any questions on this? We did discuss the committee at our last meeting. Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And staff reports, item 1, accounts, Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the certification of Director of Finance dated April 8, 2019 be received, and checks numbering 143-485 to 143-559 inclusive, and payments of accounts totaling $1,487,738.44 be approved.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item 2 from our Manager of Bylaw Services, Port Pot Shop application. City Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So there is an application for Port Pot Shop, and that is located at number 33473 3rd Avenue. This is located in the C3 Service Commercial Zone. Hours of operation proposed are 9 a.m. until 11 p.m., which is consistent with city bylaws and the provincial regulations. And I'll just remind council that on February 11th of this year, the zoning amendment was adopted to permit retail cannabis stores in 4 commercial zones, and this being one of those zones. And on March 25th of this year, the business license bylaw went through an amendment number 1 to permit retail cannabis stores as a business license permitted classification within the city of Port Alberni. So as part of this application, public input was sent out. So we did a 75-meter radius letter mail out, as well as posted in the local newspaper for consideration. Of those sent out, 1 response was received and is attached as part of your application. And the concern, it was a negative comment from a neighboring business and concern of parking. I'll also advise that the applicant is in the audience. If you do have any questions for him, it's Mr. Alfrank. And I will remind council that the province goes through quite a strict process in terms of regulations. And in terms of council's options, there's 4 options on applications. So option number 1 is to provide a positive recommendation and endorse the application, which is what staff is recommending. Option number 2 is to provide a positive recommendation with comments to the province. An example of this would be if the hours proposed are outside of what our city bylaws would permit, so you'd want to comment back. Option 3 would be provide a negative recommendation, but it's recommended that you provide rationale as to why you're going to provide negative comment if our bylaws are in compliance. And option number 4 would be to provide no comment. And it's worth noting to Mayor and Council that if no comment is provided, the province will automatically defeat that application and not proceed forward. Thank you.
Okay. Let's start by first moving receipt of the Manager of Bylaw Services report dated April 2nd, 2019. Somebody like to move that?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Is there a seconder? Okay. Now, are there any questions or comments on the report? Councillor Corbeil.
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate Mr. Frank for cleaning up the area there. The back looks really nice. There was a concern, as was described, and I just hope, maybe, and I don't know what the lighting's like right now, but the concern was that, in the alley, if there were people parked adjacent to stores, could be a little threatening. So I would just advise that if at all possible to make sure the lighting in the back is sufficient, but it does look really very nice.
Councillor Poon.
Yes, I'm a little concerned about this map here. It shows the exiting onto a alleyway. Would there be any way for people exiting the store to be warned of oncoming traffic or things like that?
The applicant is here if we want to ask that question of him, if you want to just come forward, if you don't mind.
Madam Mayor, Councillors, thank you. To answer your question, we've totally redone the backyard in our 3473 3rd Avenue. The exit right now, it does look on here as if it's coming out onto a paved alleyway. In fact, we have put like a sun deck out there. We've included a wheelchair access ramp, and we have 2 sets of stairs. Both sets of stairs coming and going actually go directly into the backyard, not into the alleyway itself. So when you come out the door, say the alleyway is here, it forces you to walk parallel to the alleyway.
So the wooden stairs are encroaching onto the alleyway then?
No, they go into the backyard of that
okay.
3473 3rd Avenue.
Okay, so it's completely within your property?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I read Mr. and Mrs. Hoole's letter with their concern, and had a discussion with the girls up at Flandangos who had We Medical beside them for several years, and they were quite positive. Their only down thing was when they actually packaged the material on site, that it did get a little odorous around there, but they said that people just came and went, minded their business. There was no people hanging around. There was nobody that came in and parked in the back alleys or anything like that around Flandangos. So I'm thinking Mr. Hools, I can sympathize with his changing, so he's feeling a little threatened, but I think these people are just going to come in, get their stuff, and go. I don't think there's going to be an issue with parking elsewhere or anything like that, because it's just a quick come and go business.
For sure. Thank you. Councillor Haggard?
Somebody did mention earlier, that was my concern too, when I saw this application, was the lack of parking immediately in the area. Is there parking around back or just the exit?
What we've done now is, number one, Port Pot Shop will take up the rear of 3473 3rd Avenue. So that forces basically the store front is facing the alleyway. So we will have excess lighting out there, so it won't be unfriendly, if you will. Our past, we've noticed, like you say, Councillor, is people come in and get their product and they go away. They leave it packaged up, they just want to get home and do whatever. As far as the parking itself, we've remediated our whole back area. So we dug out the soil that was there, brought in road gravel. We've put in what they call blue chip on top, which will make a nice hard surface for even wheelchair access. And we've actually, probably as we're speaking now, we have the parking curbs being delivered to the backyard. So they'll be well marked, easy access in and out.
I apologize, I never thought to drive around to see the back of the facility, but I'll do that on my way home.
Yeah, and that's, parking has been an issue in the past in that area of town, always has been. We have people that would park in our weedy backyard and go to, a number of the other areas just for shopping and then come back and remove their cars. Having the front of our business face the back, it invites the people to come to that parking area now to come to that building. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Solda, any questions? Okay, thanks very much. So we have, Councillor Poon.
Half, actually.
Sure.
Are there any other businesses in town that have a storefront that face an alleyway?
I don't think so.
Madam Mayor, we're all looking around, but I believe we don't have the answer at this time.
Nobody can identify one off the top of their mind. Okay, we have the motion moved and seconded. All in favor on, this is just receipt of the report. All in favor? Carried. And would somebody like to make the second motion there? Councillor Corbeil?
I would like to move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni supports the approval and authorization of the Port Pot Shop located at number 3, 3473 3rd Avenue, and endorses the comments as provided in the report from the Manager of the Bylaw Services dated April 2nd, 2019.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and are there any further questions or comments on this one? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay. And item 3 from our Manager of Bylaw Services, Hive Cannabis application. City Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we have a retail cannabis store application for Hive Cannabis. This is located at 4152 Redford Street, which is Zone C2 General Commercial. And the proposed hours of operation will be 9 a.m. until 11 p.m., which is consistent both with city bylaws and provincial regulations. And again, not to sound repetitive, but as part of the process per application, on February 11th, 2019, zoning amendments were adopted by this council to permit retail cannabis stores in 4 commercial zones, and this zone being one of those. On March 25th, the business license bylaw amendment number 1 was passed to permit retail cannabis stores as a permitted classification. And as part of this process, public notice was posted, 75-meter radius, to the proposed site, as well as posted in the local newspaper. And this one did receive quite a bit of comment. So I've highlighted in my report that 148 notices were received when sent out. 3 negative comments were returned, and as well as the late item you have before you. Of these, I think it's worth commenting that one of the comments was from a already approved retail cannabis store owner in close proximity. The second was a local business owner located directly beside the proposed site. And the third was from a resident within that 75-meter radius. Following that correspondence, we did receive 5 letters of support from local businesses that have been attached to the application, as well as one from the landlord themselves saying that they support the application. And again, options for council to proceed is 1, to provide a positive recommendation in support, which is what city staff are proposing. Option number 2 is provide a positive recommendation with comments. Option 3 is a negative recommendation, but providing rationale as to why. And option 4 would be provide no comment, so ultimately defeating the motion and provide no comment, which would automatically stop the provincial process. And again, you heard earlier, but the representative for the applicant is in the room and available for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Washington, would you like to move receipt of the report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the report from the manager of Barlaw Services dated April 2, 2019 be received.
Okay, is there a seconder? Second. And any questions on the report? Actually, Councillor Solda.
Yeah, I have 2 concerns, not of the application. My main concern is that it's how close it is to the rye application for his cannabis, and what was our distance that we had put in. I'm just kind of update on that.
City Clerk.
Madam Mayor, as part of drafting and adopting the bylaws, no setbacks were established between businesses, only a 300-meter setback from schools.
Okay, so that's one concern, and I know business is business, but the other one is one of the letters that we received, the optical shop has concerns regarding the kids that are going to be going in and out of his shop, and I wonder, did we allow anything, can you just, about regarding kids and that?
Madam Mayor, the only setback restriction was to schools.
Okay.
The concern for children or any questions might be best answered by the applicant or the representative for the applicant on what those concerns might look like.
And I know there's lots of rules and stuff like that regarding the windows and stuff like that, and you can't see inside, and I've seen that in a lot of the shops. So, I mean, that might address all of that. And maybe we can hear from the applicant regarding that, the concerns from the letters that we have received.
Absolutely, come on up.
Thank you. Through the Madam Mayor, I mean, when it comes to children, the whole idea of the federal legalization was to keep cannabis out of the hands of children. Doing that is legalizing cannabis, allowing normal retail stores. And so I've been involved in cannabis applications, Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC, dealt with many different municipalities. And from a planning perspective, if we had to consider every single establishment that children might frequent with their adult parents, it would essentially sterilize everything, and then where would we locate, right? So, but when it comes to children, it's something, it's true, our windows are covered, and 19 plus only allowed in the stores. Unlike a liquor store where you see kids come with their parents, that's not allowed with cannabis, right? So children aren't allowed in the stores at all. But I mean, we're definitely sensitive to children and the impact and keeping it out of their hands. But unfortunately, it's not really fair. We already have setbacks and considerations and high regulations. We also need to thrive as a business and locating in commercial districts that adults frequent primarily, or adults accompanied by their children. That it's hard to accomplish that if we factor every component, right?
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My concerns were along the same line as Councillor Sold. It's not so much as the business next door, but you're in close proximity to McDonald's. which is directed at children. So that is my concern. Is your heart set on this location? Have you looked anywhere else in the community for something that's suitable, that maybe not so close to McDonald's, that's directed at children? Because there's going to be a lot of traffic there for kids.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately, once we pick a spot, it's kind of set in stone with the province. It's a very long process with the province to even get a referral letter sent out. And there's already, the market's shaking out or has already shaked out in Port Alberni with other cannabis operators. Again, with respect to children, if we had to, and McDonald's came up for another application that I was dealing with in Cranbrook, and you know, I understand it. There's children that go there. There's children that frequent there. But this is a commercial district that is frequented by adults, and if adults are letting their children go out to McDonald's, for example, on their own, then obviously they have trust that they're not going to get into trouble elsewhere. Because the reality is, I mean, the children can find trouble if they're looking for trouble if they're not accompanied by their parents. So, again, if we had to take every single and I've heard everything there could be heard. If we had to factor all that in, it would sterilize most of the town, and it would be very hard for us to locate and find a suitable place to operate and stay competitive, right? So, I mean, I've heard concerns. People just want us to kind of be hidden, and I don't think that is achieving the overall goal of cannabis, is getting rid of the black market, going mainstream, and letting the government control and regulate it. And the easiest way to do that, and I'll speak to the store setbacks if I can, is to let us go mainstream and let us push those black market guys out, get rid of the criminal element, and let the government control it. And so with the setbacks between stores, it's another common theme that comes up in every municipality. And I think that especially in BC, where you know, well, I should say, if a city's looking at restricting the number of providers, they should really vet the applicants, right? Who's the owner of the company? If you're not, then the market will hash it out. They will, the cream will rise to the top. The best store operators that has the best reputation will succeed, right? So I think those are just factors to consider when you're looking at setbacks between stores and competition. If you want to limit the number of stores, you should really look at the applicants, because that's who you're going to be stuck with. If you don't, then the market will decide.
I appreciated your presentation at the beginning because it sounds like you're very professional. And that was my only concern with this application.
Thank you.
Was the close proximity, but thank you for your presentation. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. And Councillor Poon?
I have no concerns, and I support this application.
Okay. Councillor Corbeil?
Just a question, I guess, to staff. The late correspondence we received, there was a concern that potentially we could have facilities all over town. And as the applicant just said, we've chosen to let the market dictate how many facilities there can be. Do you know, are there other facilities that are sort of waiting in the queue to apply for licensing?
City Clerk?
Madam Mayor, these are all the applications we have received from the province to date, but that's not to say that they are going through that process with the province.
There's not 6 more applications waiting for us for the next 3 meetings.
There is not.
Thank you. Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too was like the letter writer about the closest of proximity to it, but then, like the gentleman says, those who, you know, the good guys are going to keep in business and the bad guys aren't. Just a couple of questions. This would be prepackaged, sealed, like all other stores. There wouldn't be no. I say the biggest concern that we had in the past was packaging on site and the smell from the packaging. But this stuff all comes factory sealed and should be zero smells to any of the neighbors.
Correct. Through the chair, there's the common misconception is it smells in the store. It doesn't. Everything is sealed at the licensed producer level. We're not authorized to open it unless it's for sample jars, which are also sealed. So there, you know, I've been in legal cannabis stores already in Alberta and one in BC. There is no smell in the store, so that's good, and that is a concern a lot of people have. Everything is packaged. You can't open it. There's no smell in the stores.
Okay. Another question. You know how congested that parking is in front of that building, because Dr. Trees I'm a patient of his, and it's sometimes a struggle to get parking there. I was just, didn't know if you could find a place where the parking was a little more easy of parking. And then my third question would be, when you talk about taking out the black market and stuff, do you know if the pricing of the controlled substance is going to be in line with what it's selling for illegally right now, or is it going to be in line to try and eliminate those black market, or is it going to be so overpriced that the people are going to be forced to go to the black market for a cheaper price?
Okay, so first question with regards to parking, because this is zone C2, this is a retail use, you could get any retailer in there, right? So the parking discussion, I get often, and because there's so much public input with cannabis, parking comes up, and my default is, well, what other uses could actually make the parking situation worse? With cannabis, people are generally in and out, and it doesn't bog down the parking for extended periods. It's kind of like a liquor store. People shuffle in and out. In addition to that, if you're not, I've seen big setbacks, like 1 kilometer setbacks between stores in certain areas. That's how you bog down your parking and your traffic, because these stores can potentially get busy. If you allow more stores, it's going to relieve the parking and traffic impact on each site until the market again hashes out. So I don't think there'll be a parking concern more than any other retail use there that might not necessarily be under the same amount of scrutiny. And then with regards to the other question with the black market, I don't know exactly black market pricing. I imagine they can definitely be more competitive than us, which is going to be a challenge. We are going to compete with the black market, just like I imagine liquor competed with bootleggers for a while. However, I think when it comes to safety and quality control and just being on the right side of the law, we're hoping that customers will move towards the legal route and steer away from the black market. And it definitely is going to take time. It's going to be a struggle. That's one of the hurdles as a legal guy. We have to compete with them, right? And so again, I believe the more stores, the better, the easier access for people to go that legal route. And a good example of this would be the city of Vancouver. So they were one of the first municipalities in Canada to go down the route, and they call it the gray market. It still was illegal. But what happened there is they pushed people used to going into that retail setup, right? So that was I think, a major step into getting rid of the black market, is getting people used to going into that retail front to purchase, right? So, but yeah, I think at the start we're not going to be competitive, but we got to rely on our safety, the quality of our product, customer service, convenience, everything to try and push the black market out, and also education too.
Thank you very much. And City Clerk, did you have a comment on that?
Madam Mayor, I'd just quickly like to respond and make 3 quick comments to some of the questions I've heard. In terms of children entering the premise or being near the premise, you need to be 19 to enter, and the province requires that you provide identification upon entry. So that would be ensuring that no children are entering unlawfully. In regards to the concern for being in close proximity to a McDonald's, I do think it's worth noting that the BC Public Store is located in close proximity to the A&W, and the application you just heard is very close proximity to a Dairy Queen. So to consider that as a factor might be contradictive.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Solta?
Yeah, I do have a question regarding Dr. Trees, the optical shop. Have you been in and talked to him or anything like that? About his letter? You must have seen the letter, so.
Yeah, and through the chair, so my colleague did speak with the optometrist clinic and had a conversation with them. I've done a lot of public consultation, and unfortunately we do our best to talk to people, explain our business model, talk about stats, everything, but we're not going to get everyone on board, right? So yeah, we did have a conversation. It was clear her position, and then we just left it at that. After the fact, we're always willing to be. We always want to be a good neighbor. So if we can proceed with this, we're still going to make our best effort to be very neighborly, comply with all the bylaw requirements. We don't want anything going on outside the store, any smoking, anything like that. So we're still trying to be a good neighbor even after the fact. It's important to us and important to our brand and important to our owner, Neil, to have his stores run smoothly and be a positive impact on the community.
And one final concern he has is regarding security. So could you just we know what the province wants for security, but are you enhancing it, or are you doing anything different to what the regulations state to have?
Definitely. I mean, we'll definitely meet all the provincial security requirements with the physical security. But I think another, then this came up at another meeting with regards to security, is the question of bootlegging. So that was a big concern, and the main, I think, avenue we can to prevent that, because that is a security issue, is education. So education is also a big component, not only in the safe consumption of cannabis, but also with regards to the federal legislation that put a 10-year sentence on bootlegging, selling to minors. So I think educating our clientele and stuff like that is a key component of security, but also working with law enforcement on anything that we seem as suspicious or any potential problems is important.
Thank you.
Councillor Poon.
Thank you. How many jobs will this store create?
Typically, we're in the range of 3 to 6 employees, but we really push to hire locally, so that include contractors. Hopefully they're available, not too busy. But yeah, we try to hire locally as much as we can, and local managers, local employees. So we definitely want to create jobs in the community and support the community. We also give back through charitable donations. We pick one cause a year and give back that way as well.
Okay, thank you very much for
you.
all the information provided on this. I think that when our council set out on this path, it was important. One of the deciding factors in not putting in a distance requirement was that, if we limit it to 3, we won't necessarily end up with the 3 best stores. But if we let the market decide, then, only the stores that are providing a quality service in the community will likely survive. And if there's a market for the stores, then the stores are going to be successful. Enhance the competition of that. So we have a motion on the floor for the receipt of the report. Any further questions or comments on that? Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Did we not say that there had to be a separate entrance and exit on these at the stores that we're approving? I just I just had to look at the picture, and something twigged in my head to say that they had to have a separate entrance and a separate exit.
It's my understanding that the province does require a separate entrance and exit, and this specific site might not have undergone the renovations yet that the province would require, but they will be expected to.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so on receipt of the report, all in favor? Carried. Before we proceed to the next motion, we do have a late item here. City Clerk, do you want to just highlight the late item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the late item is from Jack McClellan, and it's a public response to this application. And as some of you have already discussed, it addresses concerns in terms of the proximity and the number of stores that are being considered. And it does highlight that council hasn't determined a set number of applications that they will be considering, and urges council to do so.
Great. Somebody like to move receipt of the late item? Is there a seconder? Okay, on receipt of the late item, all in favor? Carried. And Councillor Poon, would you like to make the next motion?
Thank you. I'll move that council for the city of Port Alberni supports the approval and authorization of Hive Cannabis located at 4152 Redford Street, and endorses the comments as provided in the report from the Manager of Bylaw Services dated April 2nd, 2019.
Is there a seconder? Okay, and comments? Councillor Haggard.
Just in response to City Clerk's comments about the close proximity of McDonald's, Dairy Queen is more of a drive-to destination, and same with A&W, where McDonald's, they get a lot of high school kids walking there, so that was my concern. I love the applicant. The location still concerns me, but we have nothing in our bylaws that would justify voting no, so.
Thank you. And I'll say that McDonald's was a bit of a concern for me as well for similar reasons. And what ultimately I think is making me lean toward approving is that it is really in a separate part of that complex down below. It's not, next door, separate parking lot and everything. So although I agree with you, that is a concern. For me, I think it's not factoring in as much of a deciding factor. Any further comments or questions on this? Okay, so on the motion, all in favor? And opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 4 from our Manager of Planning, Development Variance Permit 3541 10th Avenue. Welcome.
Hello? Is it working? Yeah, okay, I think we're there. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is a bit of a mostly procedural, I'd say. So if you recall back to the last council meeting, which unfortunately I wasn't in attendance because I was quite sick, there was a bit of a minor mix-up, miscommunication just between staff. So council actually received the incorrect development variance motion. And I think it's just important to clarify because staff did catch this after sending out public notice with the recommendation that was intended to be brought forward, which was essentially to have a variance for a 4-foot fence with a 2-foot lattice. What council received and reviewed was the development variance motion that was originally brought forward to the Advisory Planning Commission, which was not meant to be brought forward to council because they had recommended what I just talked about, the 4-foot fence with a 2-foot lattice. What you received was for a 6-foot fence variance. So just a bit of a clerical error and a miscommunication, and I apologize for not catching that sooner, but essentially that puts us in a position where I think it's important to make a consideration either to move forward with the motion that you previously reviewed, which was for the 6-foot fence variance, which will require us to go back and send out a new public notice because we had sent out incorrect information to the neighbors, and then bring back the final development variance on April 23rd at the next council meeting, or for you to rescind that motion and move forward with the motion that was intended to be brought forward by the Advisory Planning Commission and myself, which was for a 4-foot fence and a 2-foot lattice on top. So I hope that kind of clarifies. It's primarily procedural, but it's really up to you how you'd like to move forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, do you have any questions to clarify this? Councillor Corbeil.
So if I'm clear, the neighbors were looking at the potential for a 6-foot fence, and you had no comments. In fact, what you're saying now is a 6-foot fence, but the top, whatever it is, 1.5 or 2 feet, would be lattice. Is that correct?
So, yeah, it's a little confusing. So what we had sent out, what staff sent out as for the public notice was what we had intended to bring forward to council, but what you did not receive, which was the Advisory Planning Commission's recommendations for a 4-foot fence and a 2-foot lattice. So 6 feet in total, but the top 2 feet being semi-permeable, so you could see through it essentially and mitigate visibility issues with the property. That public notice was sent out, so they have received that, but it's not congruent with the motion that was approved by council at the last meeting. So we would still have to send it out again, regardless, to be in compliance with provincial legislation, because there's caveats around the number of days that the public receive notice before council makes their final decision.
Okay, and thanks for clarifying because, and we also, I believe we did, so we got the Advisory Planning Commission report, and most of the talk in both of the reports that we received were 4-foot fence, 2-foot lattice. I think it was just the motion that we read out, so I certainly was not intending to have a 6-foot fence, no lattice, so thanks for clarifying this. Any further questions from council before we get to these motions? Okay. Oh, is it Councillor Corbeil?
Just a quick comment. I've become somewhat of a fence savant in the last couple weeks. And I appreciate that most communities seem to have 4-foot front, 6-foot side, 6-foot back. But, you know, it just seems like you could put up a 4x8 sheet of plywood across the front and that would meet the intent of the bylaws versus somebody could make a 7-foot fence that looks 10 times better. So I think the whole thing has to be reviewed, because we could have the bylaw, we could hire another dozen bylaw officers if we're not careful here.
So I will agree with you completely on your comment. The whole thing needs to be reviewed. I think my issue with this in general, and I agree, my issue with this in general is that we should be reviewing our bylaw on this and not looking at a one-off variance. I think it sets a dangerous precedent for us to give a variance for a effectively 8-foot height fence with the bottom that's there as well from the sidewalk when we're in the process, or when we're approaching reviewing that bylaw. So I would rather see us go through the process of deciding what our guidelines are going to be and then come back to this. I don't think we should make an allowance for a 6-foot or effectively 8-foot fence on a main road when we have not gone through that process of reviewing what our regulations are going to be going forward, or we are just furthering our issues down the road once we change the bylaws. Councillor Solda.
I would agree with you. I'd like to see it all be the same, but my concern is that we've already kind of adopted it in the past, right? From the last time, we're just doing some corrections here. So where do we go from there? And how long would a report take to get back to us would be the question. And do they need to have this done yesterday type of thing? You know, so that's my concern.
Sure. Thank you. So we've got a few speakers here. I'm going to go to City Clerk first.
Madam Mayor, I just want to answer the first part of that question. So the motion proposed is to rescind last meeting's motion that was carried. So that would be step one. And then there's subsequent options that council could consider if they wish to proceed through the new process, if they support the recommendation on the table or defeat it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And City Planner?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things to clarify. So the Advisory Planning Commission, very much in line with what I'm hearing from Mayor and Council today, is that there needs to be a review of the bylaw, and that they think that there should be some recommendations brought back from the Planning Department to the Advisory Planning Commission, and then again that would come through to you as well. So we are working on that right now, trying to consider that we have a unique situation in our community where there's multiple homes with fences and hedges that are higher than what we permit, but we're unable to enforce that. So we're trying to find a nuanced way to approach the situation, recognizing that we do want to have standards and we do want to be consistent with what SEPTED recommends with regards to safety and visibility of properties. With regards to the applicant itself and delaying further, I would say that it would be unfair to the applicant to delay the process further to wait for this report, even though we are working on it, and we're hoping to bring it forward to the next Advisory Planning Commission or the one at the latest after that. But the applicant has already been waiting 4 months to proceed with the process would probably be the fair thing to do.
I would just add that we are going through this process because the applicant began building a fence that did not meet bylaws. So I think it's really important to note here that the fact that we have a lot of fences in our community that don't meet our current bylaws because people didn't follow them and we didn't have the ability at the time to enforce that, is not a reason, in my opinion, to not have standards going forward. So I think we'll get to the rest of the conversation, then we can look at possible motions. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Planner sort of answered half of my questions, but just for clarity, what did the applicant actually ask for in the first place?
The applicant asked for a variance to allow for an additional 2 feet on top of the 4-foot fence. So they would have a 6-foot fence, but there is a 2-foot. I should clarify, the retaining wall is 2 feet at one side. It's about 6 inches at the other side. So it kind of is on an angle. So that obviously impacts the overall height from the street, from where where the sidewalk is. So they originally asked for essentially a 6-foot fence in total, but that would be on top of their retaining wall.
Okay. And Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I attended this APC meeting, I went in there with the intent, the same as you, that we can't have exceptions. We're going to open up a can of worms. But what it was not in the report that convinced me otherwise was he has a small child, and there is 2 pit bulls living next door that are quite often left unattended in the yard. And before I get jumped on by the pit bull community, I've met some lovely pit bulls, but having larger dogs left around the yard for long periods of time indicates to me that they may not be as well trained as what they should be. So a concern of people sitting on the committee was that larger dogs such as these do have the ability to jump over a 4-foot fence very easily if they intended to, and the child could be in somewhat of danger. So that was why I changed my mind personally, was the protection of this child and the safety of this child. So I don't know if that makes any kind of difference.
Councillor Solda.
Maybe the bylaw manager can answer that. Yeah, I'm sure he's had complaints, or maybe not.
City Clerk.
Madam Mayor, I know I wear 2 hats. Madam Mayor, just one comment in response to that. Side yard fences are 6 feet in height, so the question is the sidewalk in front, and I won't dispute that maybe the dogs pass on the front yard, but we do have bylaws in place to regulate animal behavior, and they should be on leash when in a front yard.
Thank you.
And just to carry on, regarding the, looking at the standards and having a report, when could that report be sent to council? When can it come before us?
Well, it would first come to the Advisory Planning Commission, as they requested that from staff to see what a review would entail. And so then it would come following that.
So are we looking at
APC meeting.
2 months, 3 months?
I'm hoping
Sorry.
to get that report done for this Advisory Planning Commission, but it might be another month depending on the capacity this week that if I can get it done or not.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I think we definitely should go back to review this bylaw, and I don't think we should go ahead with this particular application at this time. We should find out what we're doing with the bylaw first, enforce what we have, and then go ahead.
Can I just clarify one thing? I think, and this might be something to check in with the clerk or the CAO perhaps in this instance, we get variances all the time. Maybe not, I shouldn't say all the time, but we do get variances, and there's 2 different types of variances. There's the Board of Variance if you're facing a hardship based on the kind of the physicality of your property, and then there's variances to our bylaws, and that's what this is. Every time that we receive a variance, we don't necessarily go through a process of reviewing the whole bylaw, because with planning, yes, the bylaws are very important, and yes, we should absolutely have standards, and I would never advocate for anything else, but there is the ability to be site-specific and to think about the context of those, how those regulations hit a very specific property, right? And so that's what the variance process is for. Every variance doesn't necessarily mean that we trigger a bylaw review, as we are in this case, but I just want to provide that for some context.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to point out that this motion was approved at the last meeting by City Council. So now you're saying a couple of weeks later that you're not going to approve it. That doesn't really make sense, and I don't think it's fair to the applicant. I think we should approve the variance at this time for this applicant and continue on with the review of the bylaw.
And to clarify, we're not considering approving it or disapproving it today. We're just continuing on the process, which has public input and is a formal process. Councillor Corbeil.
Yeah, I just want to concur with what Councillor Haggard said, that I have no problem with this going forward, and I think it's 2 separate issues. I mean, as I said, there's fences all over town that don't meet the bylaw, and I think it would be unfair to this applicant if we didn't allow that fence to get built. It's sort of in the process right now, but also, trigger a bylaw review to make something a little bit more practical and something we can enforce.
Councillor Solda.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat here too with Councillor Haggard and Councillor Corbeil. It's really hard because we do get variance, and I agree with the the planner, we do get variances all the time coming in, and we do change, and we already went through this. We're just fixing what we went through, and going through the procedure of taking a look at the whole thing. It's a good thing, and I think as things come up, we're going to be doing this a lot in the future.
Councillor Poon?
Thank you. It seems silly that we're now saying that we want to go ahead with it, but in the future, we might be asking them to tear it down. So it seems like they could be putting potentially a lot of money and work into it. And in the future, we may not want them to have that fence, right?
If we give them a variance, then even if we set a different bylaw,
Yeah.
they won't have to tear it down, but we would be, within a very short period of time, in my opinion, setting a set of regulations that may be different and asking everyone in the community to comply with those, and within a couple weeks potentially of that, at the same time letting somebody go against that bylaw that we might be setting. So to me, it seems a little bit backwards, but I also don't think that it is. I don't think that it is the end of the world if we proceed with this process. I just think that we are moving in. We're reacting to somebody doing something outside of our bylaws, and I think that's an important note to consider in this. So I think we do need to do a review of this. Absolutely, glad to know that that's underway. But in my opinion, I don't understand why we would approve a variance when we're in process of reviewing the bylaw. We should expect everyone to comply with the bylaw once we approve it. So giving someone a variance a couple weeks before doesn't make sense to me. Councillor Solda?
And Madam Mayor, the only reason I asked when this report would be available and for us to take a look at, I can wait a month, but I don't want to wait 3-4 months for this application to say yay or nay. And that's why I'm asking when the earliest it can be done. And I know you have lots on your desk. So that's a question. Oops.
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, for sure. Councillor Haggard, did you have another comment? No. Okay. Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm really torn too, because was the young gentleman not at the beginning of the meeting and thanking us, and now we're gonna pull it out from under his feet? Am I understanding that correctly?
I don't think that's what we're looking to do, but we actually have no motions on the table right now, so that's important to comment.
Okay. No, it's just like Councillor Colbreel said, Councillor Haggard, and even Councillor Solda, they sort of, we said, yes, you can do this, but just kidding. I mean, I think when he presented himself, he was quite looking forward to that peace of mind, having that fence, and he went through the proper channels. I mean, there's probably 20 out there that just said, "To heck with City Hall. I'm going to throw that baby up there and beg for forgiveness later on," because I know that happens a lot, especially when it comes to add-ons and sheds and carports and stuff. So I'm torn. I'm really torn because, like I say, he went through the proper channels and we said okay, and now we're saying not okay. So just my comment.
But just one comment is that actually is what happened here. So the fence was being built to a height that did not comply with our bylaws. And so this came about as a bylaw complaint, and then the proper process started. So, and I don't think that we should necessarily fault that, because I don't get the impression it was intentional. A lot of people just do not understand city processes, and it's our responsibility to communicate what our bylaws are to some extent. But I think it is important to note that, this did come about, and unfortunately the house is on a main road, so it was noticed. But I know I drove by that house and thought, what is being built there? Like a 10-foot fence, it looked like. So, that is how the process started, though, was somebody who just decided to build it and then was stopped. So we don't necessarily need to not proceed with it because of that, but it's a note. Okay, so I'm going to start by asking Councillor Solda to move that we receive the report.
Madam Mayor, I move that the report dated April 3rd, 2019 from the Manager of Planning be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any further comments? All in favor? Carried. And the next one, Councillor Solda.
Okay, Madam Mayor, I move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni rescinds the motion relating to a development variance permit for 3541 10th Avenue which was adopted at March 25th, 2019 regular meeting of council.
Is there a seconder? And just to clarify, this is to rescind so that at just the 6 foot, and we're moving to the next motion is to move to the 4 foot with 2 foot lattice. Did you have a further comment on that? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Okay, and Councillor Solda, if you wish to continue.
Madam Mayor, I move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni direct staff to proceed with the necessary development variance permit to vary zoning bylaw number 4832 as follows. To permit the addition of a standard dimension strip of latex having a maximum width of 0.6 meters, 2 feet to the top of 125 meters, 4.1 feet, fenced by variance of fences and hedges, section 6.7.3, the height permitted within a required front yard from 1.25 meters, 4.1 feet, 2 foot, to 1.8 meters, 6 foot, and a variance of 0.55 meters, 1.8 feet on Lot 8, District Lot 1, Alberni District Plan 5750, PID 005-926-513, 3541 10th Avenue.
Is there a seconder? Thank you.
I just,
Councillor Solda.
one more question. The report, and this is going to, you say 2 months, about 2 months, that it would come in on,
No. I'm hoping that I'll be able to get it done by this Thursday to give it to the Advisory Planning Commission for the next scheduled meeting, which is in 2 weeks from now, more or less. If not, if I can't make that deadline, it would be delayed till the May Advisory Planning Commission, but it would come probably about a week or so after to council. So probably at most a month and a half, at best less than a month.
Okay. Any further comments?
And just to be clear, this is just so that we can give public notice with this. You will have the chance to give full weighted consideration after hearing back from the public and the neighbors at the April 23rd meeting on the variance itself.
so, Madam Mayor?
Sure.
So this goes to public hearing next, right?
No,
this
there's a
is it.
public notice that's provided just to, I think it's maybe a 75 meter radius around the
And then this will
property.
come back to us?
It'll come back for your final decision whether or not to actually grant the variance.
Okay,
Yeah.
that works for me. Thank you.
Okay.
And hopefully the report will be done by then.
Okay, seeing no further questions or comments, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much for that. Moving on to bylaws. Item 1 from the Manager of Planning Advisory Planning Commission. So we have our summary report there, and we'll go into the information when we get to the applicants. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to move receipt?
I would like to move that the summary report of the March 20th, 2019 meeting of the Advisory Planning Commission be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions? All in favor? Carried. And item A is development application, official community plan amendment number 27-2940 Bells Hill Road, applicant D. Carrier. And it's an official community plan amendment. Manager of Planning.
So we've received an application for an OCP and rezoning at 2940 Bells Hill Road. The OCP amendment would be from future residential to residential, so changing that in the OCP. And the zoning bylaw amendment would be from future development to RR2, semi-rural residential. We've brought this forward to the Advisory Planning Commission and had a discussion about it. With regards to the land use, it seems relatively in context with what's happening already in that area of town. The application would facilitate future subdivision application for 6 lots and 1 large lot behind that. So a bit of gentle densification happening there, which seems relatively appropriate within the context of the neighborhood. There was some concerns brought up by Island Health with regards to the size of the lots, and they recommended that the lots either be larger or that we, through the subdivision process, agree to some sort of servicing where we bring municipal services to the property. So that was supported as well by the Advisory Planning Commission, that we bring sanitary and water services out to the property and connect them with the city services. That's already kind of congruent with what's happening. Servicing has already started to be extended out past Uplands too, up along Bird Street. So that should be something that should be achievable through the process. So otherwise than that, we support the application and think it's consistent with the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Poon, would you like to start by making that first motion?
Yes. I'll move that official community plan amendment number 27, 2940 Bells Hill Road, Carrier, bylaw number 4985, be now introduced and read a first time.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and are there any questions on this application? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And Councillor Poon, would you like to continue?
I'll move that official community plan amendment number 27, 2940 Bells Hill Road, Carrier, bylaw number 4985, be read a second time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Seeing no questions, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And zoning bylaw map amendment number 32, 2940 Bells Hill Road, Carrier, number 4986.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we received an application to have a zoning bylaw amendment from RR1 rural residential to R1 single family residential at 3512 Gagne Road. The purpose of this rezoning would be to facilitate a subdivision application to create one new smaller lot on the north end of the property. Again, this is actually quite close to the adjacent property that we were just speaking of. So again, it's quite consistent with the development that's already happening in the area. There's already services to the property. The only challenge that seems to exist at this point is that there is a ditch on the north end of the property, and we'd have to work with the applicant through the subdivision process to figure out how to properly reroute that and make any sort of considerations if there happens to be any natural features of that ditch, but I believe that it's actually a man-made ditch and not a stream. So with regards to the rezoning, it seems appropriate for the area and we support it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
And we got ahead because we missed the second part, or the second bylaws for the Bells Hill one. So I will get Councillor Poon to continue.
I'll move that zoning bylaw map amendment number 32, 2940 Bells Hill Road, Carrier, bylaw number 4986, be now introduced and read a first time.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. And continue.
I'll move that zoning bylaw map amendment number 32, 2940 Bells Hill Road, Carrier, bylaw number 4986, be read a second time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions? All in favor? Carried. And on item B, Councillor Poon, would you like to continue?
Sure. I'll move that zoning bylaw map amendment number 33, 3512 Gagne Road, Burrell, bylaw number 4987, be now introduced and read a first time.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions on this one? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried.
I'll move that zoning bylaw map amendment number 33, 3512 Gagne Road, Burrell, bylaw number 4987, be read a second time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. And would you like to continue with the public
Yes.
hearing setting?
I'll move that official community plan amendment number 27, 2940 Bells Hill Road, Carrier, bylaw number 4985, zoning bylaw map amendment number 32, 2940 Bells Hill Road, Carrier, bylaw number 4986, and zoning bylaw map amendment number 33, 3512 Gagne Road, Burrell, bylaw number 4987, be advanced to a public hearing on May 13th, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. in the City Hall Council Chambers.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Okay. Thank you. And on to item 2 from the Director of Finance, tax rate 2019, bylaw number 4988. Does anyone have questions or comments on this? This is just the continuation of our financial process. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This could be just because I'm not really familiar with the assessment and tax process yet, but in the first paragraph that says this is an overall increase of 3% from 2018, then under discussion, and then a couple paragraphs after that, it says resulting in a 2.3% increase, and I'm not sure why there's a difference or what that means. Sorry. I just need to be clear what exactly the increase is.
Thank you, Director of Finance.
Thank you. We calculated 3% overall tax rate. For example, we collect roughly $23 million in taxes, and that's a 3% raise over the total amount we collected last year. Now, the 2.3 refers to the average single-family residence, to put it into perspective. Okay.
The 2.2 is for the average single-family residence, and then it says, so it says here, estimated property tax changes based on completed roll showed an average of 2.2%, the average single-family residential property, and then it says 2.3 below.
Yes, it shook out to 2.3 because the assessments went down with the appeals.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any further questions on this? Okay. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That the report dated April 2, 2019 from the Director of Finance be received.
And is there a seconder? Second. Any further questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Continue.
That the tax rate 2019 bylaw number 4988 now be introduced and read a first time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Continue.
That the tax rate 2019 bylaw 4988 be read a second time.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions? All in favor? Carried.
And that the tax rate 2019 bylaw number 4988 be read a third time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you. Moving on to correspondence for action. The first item we have here is the letter dated March 25th, 2019, requesting a letter of support be written to the province regarding the graduated licensing program for motorcycles, and that's from the District of Kitimat. Councillor Haggard, would you like to make that motion?
I move that the letter dated March 25th, 2019, requesting a letter of support to be written to the province regarding the graduated licensing program for motorcycles, GLP-M, be received and that council directs staff to provide a letter of support.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
And are there any questions on this? None? All in favor? Carried. And item 2 from the Alberni Valley Social Planning Council, a letter dated April 2nd, 2019, requesting council provide an update on their request to create a social planning commission. Manager of Planning, are you able to give us an update on if any work has been done on this to date?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So we have had a couple internal discussions, myself and the former interim consulting planner, Joe Kalenda, as well as myself and CAO, Tim Ply. So it hasn't gone unnoticed, and it is something that we have been talking about internally in terms of how best to support this, what best practices are, what capacity and authorities we would give to this type of commission or committee. With regards to the status, though, where we left off was waiting for a bit of insight based on the strategic plan to get a sense of what the direction of mayor and council were in terms of priorities before fully going in and writing a report with recommendations. And then just also getting caught up on some of the files that have been backlogged while there wasn't really anyone in the position. But it hasn't gone unthought about, and it just hasn't been pushed to the top of the list yet.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I wonder, and maybe the CAO or yourself can comment on this, but what is the capacity of our planning department currently with the number of applications that we're getting to properly support something like this, because I think if we create this council or commission, that we want to make sure it is properly supported and is not just another committee that the city creates and then doesn't actually, put off to be successful.
Yeah.
So CAO?
Madam Mayor, if I can begin, and then I'll ask the Manager of Planning to make comment. But first of all, it wasn't that staff was not pursuing this. The Manager of Planning did say to me, what is the priority on this? Given the other work priorities we had, I directed that she work on those backlogged files, and that we wait for Council's strategic plan to see if this was going to come to the top of the list or near the top of the list. So that's why it's been not the top priority. But in terms of what a social planning commission might do for us and what the workload would be and the support of that, I would defer to the manager of planning for that.
So often I should start off by saying that I do believe that the social planning function of a municipality is quite important. I actually got my start in planning through working through the Social Planning Advisory Committee in Nanaimo and doing some work with them and doing a homeless count actually for the Oceanside region. So I think this work is very important. With regards to the capacity of our department, it's quite limited compared to other municipalities, and often we find when you look at what other communities have with regards to a social planning committee, they often have a social planner that reports to the manager of planning or the director of planning and development services. So often with a committee there is a staff person attached to it to give it purpose and to give it some life within the organization.
Thank you. Council questions? Okay, seeing no questions. One question that I have is, and I think because I'm unsure of, how much time this would require, and aware that I think we don't really have the staffing level to support this in a successful way at the current time. With the workloads that we have, I wonder if there's an opportunity to integrate this in some way with our advisory planning commission. We also have our climate disruption and food security committee that would like to be a commission. They've asked us to be a commission, and I wonder if there's an opportunity for us to review our advisory planning committee and integrate these other commissions into that one, instead of looking at it in silos and creating multiple levels that we have to staff all of them. So I don't know if that's something that, I don't need an answer from you today, but I'm wondering if that's the direction we should possibly be looking on this, that would fit more in line with where we're at right now, not having a social planner and not having somebody that we could just designate completely to this role. Yeah. Council? Councillor Haggard.
I'm actually representing council on the Advisory Planning Commission. I think that's a good idea to incorporate those components all in one instead of having all these different committees and meetings which take a huge amount of time from staff. I think that makes perfect sense, and I'm sure the commission has a lot of different representation from different segments of our community, so I'm in agreement with that.
So I wonder if a next step could be potentially reviewing, having a brief report that reviews the structure of our advisory planning commission and who makes up the membership, especially for the newer people on council. Everybody might not be completely aware, and there might be, I don't know, I would imagine there's a bylaw that that sets out the requirements of that committee. So, maybe doing a brief review of that, instead of trying to create something new and seeing if there's an opportunity to work in the other commissions.
Could I provide
Absolutely.
a little bit more context? I think also internally we've been going through a bit of a change with the departure of the previous position, which was obviously the Director of Development Services, the introduction of a Manager of Bylaws, introduction of a Manager of Planning, and no Director of Development Services. Internally, we have also gone through a bit of a restructuring. So for me, part of this is actually reflects larger changes within the organization and what the planning department is trying to do and focus on and achieve. So, I would say that if you're reviewing how the committee works, we're also reviewing how the department works as well. So that might be something worth considering.
Okay. CAO, can you suggest next steps for us? When in doubt, ask the CAO.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. Sometimes it's not soon enough, right? But not this time. It's a tough one, right? So I don't want to throw it into that abyss of staff report and not have it come back. I would suggest that if council sees this as a priority, social planning as a priority that you want to address, say in the next 6 months, that you task staff, manager planning to bring back a report and tell us that it's a high priority. And then we'll put it near the top of the list and we'll work on that. And then it'll get worked on. If you don't think it's as high a priority as some of the other things that we're asking Ms. McDougall to work on, then don't ask us for the report. Put this on hold pending some other step that you will consider it when X happens. Maybe next year's budget cycle or something like that.
Okay, some comments. So Councillor Corbeil.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, would it be fair and relatively easy for staff to identify the mandates of these various committees, send them to council, and we can peruse them to see if there are any gaping areas that are not already being looked at, and opportunities to try to merge various issues.
Sure, we could share with council the bylaw that sets out the terms for the Advisory Planning Commission, for example. We could also set out, as you're aware, Mayor's already mentioned, the Climate Change and Food Security Committee is seeking more membership on the committee and a change in terms of reference. And they have, in the terms of reference they propose, they have suggested that they be a commission. And now social planning is back, and they've been patient. They've been saying, we want to talk to you about being a commission for the city. Other larger communities have these layers, these multiple layers, and I'm not saying they don't provide good value, they do. We don't have staff right now to support them, so we would have to staff up to support those functions. So we can provide you with a bylaw that will give you better awareness of APC. We can give you the terms of reference on the Climate Change Committee, and we can give you some documents if we have what we have on social planning. I think best if we bring you those when Ms. McDougall can bring a report and sort of synthesize all those things, and together you and Ms. McDougall can find the next steps.
Thank you. Councillor Poon? Did you have a comment? No, I don't. Okay. Councillor Solda, was it you?
Yes.
Someone over here.
Madam Mayor, I'm not knocking, I believe social planning is important, but we also did a strategic plan, and I would like to see it come forward and see where we want to make it. Do we want to make this our priority? Is this what our priority was during the strategic planning? So let us take a look at that and make a decision from there where it is on our priority list. And yes, it could be priority, but I haven't seen what we have come to, the conclusion of our report yet. So I just wanted to bring that forward.
Okay. Any comments over here? No? Okay. So I think that, CAO, you asked, is it a priority for us? I think that the Climate Disruption and Food Security Committee work is a priority. I think that Social Planning Commission work is a priority. I am somewhat nervous about putting our focus on creating the committees rather than putting our focus on doing the work that needs to be done. I know that those go hand in hand because committees can guide that work as well, and can be a great way to set priorities. But it stands out to me that we've been talking about secondary suites and carriage homes for like 3.5 years, and 3 years. And I would like to give our staff the time to do that work that will make a difference for our community. So we've started the work around suites. We haven't even begun to talk about carriage homes yet. And I think that needs to be a higher priority than setting up the layers of this committee. That said, I do think that there is an opportunity to review the membership on our APC, and as a start, at least have representation from these two other kind of bodies potentially on our APC. Maybe even if we just encourage them to start, if we encourage each of these groups to send a representation. The APC meetings are open, and I would imagine anyone can can speak up. So they don't necessarily need to be a voting member to be there and impacting the shape of the developments that are happening in our community and giving feedback. So maybe as a very easy first step, we could reach out to each of these groups and invite them to please participate as members of the public on our APC, and then go from there once we get some of our other higher priorities for planning kind of ticked off. How would council feel about that? It's not a motion, but we could definitely, I can reach out if council's good with that. Okay. Okay, so I think for right now, we want to just receive this letter.
Motion to receive.
Okay, is there a seconder? And they have asked for an update back. I think maybe staff and myself can, or CAO and myself can connect with this group. And as a part of the process, we will invite them to take part in the APC and have a further conversation about just where we're at and when we're kind of hoping to move forward. Okay, so seeing no more comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Proclamations. Number one, we have Seniors Week Organizing Committee, a letter dated March 25th, 2019, requesting that Council declare June 2nd to June 8th, 2019 as Seniors Week in Port Alberni. Councillor Haggard, would you like to make that motion? I was looking to Councillor Solda on this side, and then I thought that was out of order and it might not send the right message.
No comment.
Councillor Haggard.
I was just going to comment, you're asking the oldest person here to make this motion.
I was
Thank
wondering
you.
who I could ask that it wouldn't be offensive, and I should have asked Councillor Poon, but that was my mistake.
I think that was a burn.
I would be very pleased to move that the letter dated March 25th, 2019, from the Seniors Week Organizing Committee requesting that June 2nd to June 8th, 2019 be proclaimed as Seniors Week in Port Alberni be received and the week proclaimed as requested.
I'd be very pleased to second that motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next time I'm definitely going to Councillor Poon for that. City Clerk, informational correspondence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So there's 3 items. Number 1 is from Sherry Ridout. It's an email dated March 23rd, 2019, and it's just providing information on rural internet solutions. Item number 2 is a letter dated March 25th, 2019 from UBCM, and it provides the federal response to Council's resolution from 2018 regarding West Coast spill, marine spill response guarantee. And the final item is from Island Health. It's a letter dated March 25th, 2019, and it just provides a copy of the 2017-2018 annual report.
Thank you. Council, are there any questions on any of these items? Seeing none, Councillor Solda, would you like to move receipt?
Move to receive informational correspondence, items numbered 1 through 3 be received and filed.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. There's no report from in camera. And item L, council reports. Okay, we have, would somebody like to move that council reports be received?
I'll move that, Madam Mayor, but I just want to say there's 2 reports missing, and they will be in next council meeting's package.
Thank you. You will second that.
They were sent, Madam Mayor. They just aren't in there.
Thank you very much. And councillors, are there any questions on any of the reports? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Okay, and any new business from councillors? Seeing none, question period, which is an opportunity for members of the public and press to ask questions of mayor and council. There is one person left. Do you have any questions? Okay, thank you for being here. Okay, would somebody like to move adjournment? Second?
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you.